So I just finished watching, not reading actually, the entire movie based on Pullman's His Dark Materials series, The Golden Compass. And I was able to get through the movie. It didn't really leave me like, it didn't, it wasn't one of those films that was like, oh, it's so good, it changes my outlook on how movies are made, of course, but like it was an okay film, but like, um, I mean, I really liked all the special effects were done really well. I don't know the difference between good acting and bad acting, so I will not be commenting on the acting right now. But I think the child character did a good job, who played Lyra. But the main thing I want to talk about is the religious undertones of the film. Uh, you'd get a lot more of this if you read the book, actually, because I think, when did this movie come out? Let's check. 2007 in December. So, actually, this was before the, I think, well, this was right after the movie came out. I was in religion class at a Catholic high school, and I had this teacher. Actually, the kids were like, "Have you heard of this movie, the Golden Compass?" And at the end of the movie, they kill at the end of the book series, they kill God actually at the end, because the author hated God so much they wanted to kill him, and the Catholic Church is the villains of the story. And the response of my teacher was something like,
"That is heresy."
And so yeah, of course, because of this book was hated by at least my family and the schools I went to so much for so long, that I wanted to watch it or like read the book. And I finally got around to finding out what the story was like by watching the movie, which I just finished today. So yeah, and the most interesting thing about the movie actually wasn't the story itself. I think it was the idea that they had this this parallel Catholic Church in a different universe. Actually, well, I think the universe that this book takes place in is actually the planet Earth or something, because I heard about like Texans, and I think the guy's a Texan, but she lives in Oxford or something. So it's like an interesting parallel to the Catholic Church in the real world, except the magisterium in this book series or this movie, they're trying to cover up the existence of things that would prove their teaching wrong, like the existence of dust, which allows people to travel between worlds. But it's funny how as soon as they find out about dust, they want to go through it to take over the entire universe, even though they've already taken over their entire planet so far, pretty much. But it's kind of interesting, because it's kind of like the opposite of what is going on with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church's teachings, for example, at least, or however you want to look at it, the Orthodox Church, doesn't really matter. I mean, like, their teachings keep getting proven right, I think, especially like with the Shroud of Turin. At least it would just stay at that one point of historical artifact. I mean, you wouldn't expect it to exist if their teaching was wrong, but yeah. And the other interesting thing is, you had this building where this bear's armor was being kept, and the main character Lyra had to escape from capture the bear's armor to get the bear to fight with her and take her where she wanted to go. But the building, the magisterium headquarter building, it was like a church or something, and it looked exactly like an Orthodox church, like an Eastern Orthodox church, not even like a Latin Rite Catholic church, but like an Eastern Catholic church. And yeah, I mean, I guess they try to portray this religious organization as like a bad thing, but I think this is not something that, even if I was like super hardcore into religion, I would not be saying that this is a bad way to look at things, because like any ideology can be taken too far to an extreme where like it's no longer a force for good in the world. And this is like, the magisterium is a religious organization that is so evil that it will cover up facts to that will prove its religion wrong. And That's a pretty bad thing to do. This movie was budgeted at $100-something million, which was insane. But the movie wasn't too impressive. I mean, it's not that. It's like nothing happens in the movie. That's what I want to say. You go from the beginning of the story. Lyra, she's a character. She's a really young girl, and she lives. Well. First of all, in the world you have these characters named demons, which are actually a subset of the human soul, which is kept outside of the human body, and they transform into animals. So the human soul has two parts: the demon, which lives outside the human body, and it follows the person around, and then the actual person who's a human. But Lyra, of course, all the characters have demons, which are these magical animals. The movie actually starts out in the beginning with just how lots of different fantasy movies start out with an intro about how there's all these worlds, and there's this thing called dust, which allows you to travel between the worlds, and about how the magisterium doesn't want people to know about it. So yeah, the story does cast the Catholic Church in a pretty bad light here, because you have even in the beginning scenes, you have Lyra, the character Lyra, hiding in a closet after she was running around, and she was going into places in the mansion she lives in that rooms she wasn't supposed to be in, just exploring. So she hides in a closet, and she sees the man from the magisterium, which is the parallel to the Catholic Church, poisoning the person who's looking after her. Oh, I should have remembered this. It's Daniel Craig, James Bond. But the magisterium guy is trying to poison it, and then she watches him leave. And then when Daniel Craig comes in to drink the poison, she bursts out of the closet saying, yeah, you don't drink this, it's poison. And that was one of the better scenes in the movie, actually. And then there's this other scene where the magisterium people, the same guy who tried to poison Daniel Craig, comes back into the room. And then they talk about how Daniel Craig gives a presentation saying, okay, you guys are all wrong. There's this thing called dust that you've been saying doesn't exist for years, and there are places in the world where there is demons have no men have no demons, and even some where there is no magisterium and no authority. And then the jerk guy who looks from the Catholic Church says, that is heresy. And then he says, that is truth, which was the best scene in the entire movie, which is not saying much. But yeah, and then there's this other scene about how after that how Lyra's talking with Lord Azrael, who is Daniel Craig, and Daniel Craig says that she says, I wish I could go with you, and then Daniel Craig's like, no, you can't, don't talk about dust ever. And this is interesting because at the end of the movie, Daniel Craig is about to be arrested by a bunch of people from the magisterium for supposedly promoting heresy, which he was just presenting to the group of people. And then we get some scenes with, let's see, let me look at my notes here, scenes with her on the rooftop, talking with her friends, and then we find out that her friends get kidnapped. Well, I'm kind of going through the whole story here, but I have to talk about these things. Her friends get kidnapped by a group of people called Gobblers, which is actually run by another character that Lyra meets early on in the film, who we don't really. When I first saw that character, you don't really know what to think about her, and then I think immediately after the scene where the kids get kidnapped, Lyra's friends get kidnapped, we have a scene with Christopher Lee, and let me read this. If Daniel Craig succeeds in proving the existence of other worlds, it will contradict centuries of teaching. And then the doctor, and then they say how they're scientists or whatever, they're close to getting rid of the effects of dust so that it won't so that this whatever they don't want will not happen to people, but they're close to coming up with a solution to it. And before Lyra leaves, the master of the college actually tells her that actually gives her this thing called the Golden Compass, which I don't even know what the movie wasn't very clear about what it does, but I'd have to watch it again. But it gives her answers to questions sometimes, and like tells her. So she escapes from Mrs. Coulter, who she finds out is evil, and she's behind the kidnapping of the kids. And then the next thing that happens is she meets up with this group of people called Egyptians who save her, and they want to go north to find out what's going on with the kids being kidnapped. And then once they get to the north, but before that, she meets up with the bear I referred to earlier, helps him save his armor. And after that, basically to summarize the points I haven't touched on so far, Lyra, she finds Billy next to the facility where they're taking the kids to do some bad things to them, and which is one of her friends named, I think it's Billy or something. And then after that, she basically goes in, gets caught, and she attacks Mrs. Coulter and escapes. Then she blows up the whole facility by using this thing that the Magisterium uses to separate kids from their demons, which is a permanent process, which is like a magical thing. And she blows it up by by just setting off the machine and throwing something into that machine. And then after that, all the kids escape, and then that's the end of the story. So yeah, I guess like I wasn't very impressed by this movie. They could have taken it to a whole nother level. I mean, there was some good landscape scenes where they show like the atmosphere of like the world that the characters are living in, especially the buildings of like the church buildings, the huge massive authoritative structures. The ice world was a good atmosphere, but like we don't really care about that for like a film, because what matters most is the actual way the story is delivered, which I think could have been a lot better. So I think the weakest part of the film was actually how they delivered the plot, because it ends on a cliffhanger, like you don't know what's going to happen next, and they don't really establish like what the story is. It's not very clear like what the Golden Compass does, and but the thing I enjoyed about it was the whole concept of seeing this religious authority in this fantasy world that's based on the Catholic Church. Just how like these characters interact with it, and what would you do, like what someone would do in a world like that, where like this religious, and you don't get to see much of like their religious practices or like what they believe in their belief system. I guess this might be touched on more in the books though, but that would be interesting to see. But I have not read the books, don't even have access to them, but I might in the future, just to do another follow-up review. So this would be an introduction to Pullman's Dark Materials. And yeah, it was a children's book, so I mean it should be easier to read, but it's just the themes. It's like a counter Narnia, which is something I'd be interested in reading. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say for today, and thanks for listening to my review / short philosophical discussion about the Golden Compass movie, not the book. So thanks for listening.